Well, again, let's step back and think of the term reform itself. If you have read and understood European history, Europe had to go through, quote, religious reformation, because the position of the church was hegemonic over the state, and it was actually very, very regressive. So European history, in order to emerge into modernity, which is also built into it coloniality and so on, a particular form of reformation was initiated. That project of reformation has become universalized, meaning that in order for you to enter into modernity, you have to go through a reformation project, right? And this reformation project is to be constituted around what is called the traditional pre-modern and the modern. So you have to enter into modernity by means of engaging in reformation that replicates the historical experience of Europe, which is particular but is made universal. So I'm very critical of the deployment of the terminology, because you first have to identify what is the terminology that you have, and why this terminology enters into the Islamic lexicons at a particular time during the colonial period. And as we begin to create an imitative project, we begin to actually internalize that the problem is religion and the backwardness of religion. Now, in the critique of the Muslim world, all Islam is seen as backward. All Islam is to be changed. All Islam has to go through this process. And therefore, we begin to actually internalize the Eurocentric experience of the birth of the modern nation state on jettisoning the church and creating that reformation because they were part of the backwardness. So in this sense, one has to be very careful in the terminology. Are certain things in Islam need to be thought of and examined? Absolutely. That's been part and parcel of the Islamic tradition. If anything, fiqh in Islam or Islamic law is a collection of differences of opinion. So the notion that we had to wait till the 18th century or the 19th century for us to say that there is a difference of opinion, that's really runs contrary to the firmness of the difference of opinion. The fact that in the Sunni tradition, you have already 4 schools of Sunni legal jurisprudence that were all recognized. And within each school, you have a plethora of opinions. You have the dominant opinion, you have the minority opinion, you have the opinion that is shadh, you have the opinion that is basically outside of the school. And this is not even accounting for the particular rulings within the Shia tradition also that has its own, the Ja'fari madhab, but also marja' taqlid within each of the tradition. But the big assumption that entered into the Muslim world in the late 18th into the 19th century is that what is preventing you from entering into modernity is this backward religion that you hold it, and you're holding into these religious principles and rulings that is preventing you from replicating Europe. So it begins that the specificity of European experience is universalized and then enters into Islamic discourses. And as such, one has to be careful, even as a person that is committed to an Islamic epistemology, that we actually define the terms and what is it that we are trying to do, so we don't actually end up almost undermining our own understanding and our own construct as we relate to colonialism, post-colonialism, and Eurocentricity in the world. And I think there's been considerable problematics in the framing of what we consider to be reform, the concept of reform, how reform is introduced, and what are the foundation by it. We have almost taken the full pill of modernity and thinking that the only way for you to be a Muslim is to enter modernity. But modernity is structured around capitalism, coloniality, Eurocentricity, without and then heavy embedded in it is the racial hierarchy. Modernity is the experience of the global north of Europe, because it defines around the identity, the characters, and I would say it's defined around the conceptualization of white supremacy. So if we begin to articulate it within our own notions without understanding these aspects or these foundational cracks in it, then we're only engaging tangentially. I disagree with this aspect of Islamic law and this aspect, but what we need is to understand the structure by which our own knowledge production is being shaped around this discourse.